Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today I'm joined by the one and only John Burness. Now, not only did he build up a startup from a room in his house to a significant enterprise, and he has helped numerous businesses since, often acting as their chairman, he's also a great keynote speaker and author, and I think has a lot of common sense and really believes in no BS. And hats off to him. He's done incredible polar explorations as well, and even shouted at a polar bear. John is an incredible guy, and it's been a great privilege to get to know him over the last year or so. So without further ado, John, welcome to the show. Welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Hi, Simon. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be questioned by you.
You're very kind. And I'm looking forward to it because I think we're going to find some things out we haven't covered before. And as I said, you've got this rich background that's really interesting and not that you'd know when you first meet you sometimes, especially the polar bear stuff and the business stuff you've been around. So let's begin with the beginning one, which is, so for people that may not know you yet or haven't kept up with your resets, who are you and what are you focused on today?
I guess in a nutshell, I guess I'd say I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor. Some people have called me an adventurer. That's a bit of a high and mighty title, but I've done a fair amount of sort of exploration in my time. My main focus today, really, amongst other sort of business ventures, is teaching and helping people and business people to survive in business. So at the moment, I'm obviously quite busy.
100%, Tron, especially with the crazy world we now find ourselves in. And that was part of what I think I resonated when I got to know you, was this sort of how to get through these challenging, turbulent times. And I'm sure if you look back on your life, you've been through some of those shifts and resets. What are some of the biggest ones you've had to go through?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think pause, stop, reset. I'd actually say that's a constant. I mean, it's certainly been a constant for me throughout my life. I think if you're in business, a lot of business is actually just trying to get over and around obstacles. And I think actually when you get up to an obstacle, it's a good idea to sort of have a think about what's going to happen before you go around it. So I think it's been a constant. But I've had many big, as anyone that's sort of a mature person like me. So just sort of choosing to start a business. I was quite successful in the corporate world, and I gave that up and decided to go and start a business from the front room of a house. I did actually decide to give that up at one point in my life and concentrate on a venture. I've got divorced at some point, so there are many, many different times when I've actually sort of sat back, had a think, and maybe decided to change things.
And what was the thing that triggered you to leave the corporate job and go into working for yourself?
I think I'd always had that sort of drive and desire to do things for myself. So, I guess that was just a sort of personality thing. I'm not a bad team player, but I'm not really very good at being told what to do. So when I was in the corporate world, I had to learn how to get given instructions and how to deal with those. So I think that it was just in my nature. I just kind of had to do it, really. So, yeah. Interesting moment, though, because I was married with a small baby. And I remember going back to my wife at the time saying, "You remember that sort of really that great job I had where we were earning loads of money?" And she said yes, and I said, "Well, I've stopped doing that, and next month we're not going to get paid anything because we're doing a startup." So yeah, quite interesting.
And was that a smile and a hug and a kiss, or was that a throwing pan across the room at that moment?
Yeah. Well, she had a baby in her arms, so she couldn't hit me, but she wasn't that pleased. But she was very supportive, actually. Yeah, very supportive.
Nice. There's never a good time. They say never, there's never the optimal time for a baby, never an optimal time to do those reset points. You alluded that you've always been going through sort of pausing, stopping, resetting. The nature of your life has been that. Knowing you a bit, I'm curious, which for you do you think has been the hardest and why? Do you find it easy to pause or to stop or to reset? Which is the hard one for John?
I think it's the reset, isn't it? Because the actual reset has consequences. So pausing, you can think about pausing whilst you're carrying on with your life. Stopping, again, you've not really changed much, but actually resetting has consequences, and it often has consequences for people around you. And you kind of got to push through self-doubt. In most situations, most people have a tendency to look back and say, well, if I hadn't have done that, this would have been better. So you have to have a lot of sort of self-belief in order just to push through and move through a reset.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, that point of pushing through. Seth Godin in the book The Dip, I keep referencing when talking to clients lately. And it's really hard to know when to push through and when to go, this isn't working. With what you've been around, any tips on that point?
Well, a very good friend of mine, we were discussing a particular businessman who, I mean, this guy's been going on so tenaciously for, well, probably the best part of 10 years. And you have to admire his spirit and his fight. But as my friend said, when you're heading in the wrong direction, being tenacious is the worst possible quality that you can have. And, a lot of people say tenacity is the one key thing in business. Well, it is, but it has to be tempered with some sort of sensible thought.
I hear the wisdom. I'm looking for the aha and the action, and we'll get to that later, hopefully. And this is some of John's sort of Yoda-esque aspect he has sometimes. Like, he knows. He just waiting for you to ask the right questions.
Was that a Yoda-esque? Was it?
It was slightly tongue-in-cheek and Britishly, but I love it. It's good. It's like, no, but you're right. We used to joke in the old days about, if you motivate an idiot, what do you get? A motivated idiot. So it's really challenging, right? It's like, I'm motivated. That's a problem. It's like, and it's really tricky. Some of the people that I would have advised said you should stop doing it, their businesses take off and they make billions. And you're like, that makes no sense. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Okay. And
there's always the guy, isn't there? I mean, it's like when you're going to sell your company, there's always the guy that who sold his company for vast sums of money, and he's now driving around in a Ferrari and he's got a massive house and it all went well. And then it's never you, though, is it? That's in those circumstances. And I think we're all brought up with looking at some famous names in the newspapers, on social media, but the vast majority of business people, they're kind of earning a living and they're doing reasonably well.
And you and I know most often behind the scenes, it's not what it looks like on the outside. Right?
No, of course. Yeah.
And that's having more and more the number of people that were unicorn companies or worth 100 million that you actually now they're in jail for fraud. And it's like, that explains it. But there are some success stories out there often when you least expect. And like you've been through a lot, John. You're a smart cookie, as we say here in the UK. What's the most important lesson or lessons you wish you could give your younger self and why?
I think that's a good question, isn't it? I think probably don't worry about what others are thinking about you, because they're probably not thinking about you. And if you think they're thinking about you, it might be for 10 seconds a day. You're not really that important to most people. I think when people are younger, I mean, just simply walking into a room, you're nervous. What's everyone going to think about me? Actually, all the people in the room, they're thinking the same thing. So they're all nervous and wondering what you're thinking of them. So I think once you work that out, it gives you a sense of power. But every now and again, you'll come across somebody or some people who actually do care about you. I think those relationships are few and far between, and you should cherish those relationships.
I really love that advice, and not what I thought you were going to say, but I love that.
What did you think I was going to say?
I don't know, but wasn't that? I think it'd be slightly more of your, take on the adventure, no BS, comment, make the phone calls, But yeah, it's really interesting. There is all this sort of bit where you think other people are thinking all these things, and they really don't. And even if they do, they've got other things to worry about. But that second bit, especially about when people do actually care, cherish them. You and I'm sure we've lost friends over the last few years and beyond with lockdown and COVID and cancers and stuff. When you lose people that were like that, they're hard to replace.
Yeah, and they're often people who you would never have expected to be particularly interested in you. There's, some of the sort of strongest relationships I've had are with people that, people look at me and go, "What, you're friends with that person?" But, I know that if I was in trouble, that person would turn up and help me. So yeah, and as you get a bit older, I think you realise that all that sort of stuff's important. And if you don't stop worrying about what everyone thinks about you, it gives you an enormous amount of power.
Interesting. So we go on to a switch question now, which is, personally, I always find books and movies have helped me navigate my pauses, stopping and resets. They've inspired some of them, given me room to think and explore. I'm just curious, have you found books and movies part of your life? Do you read? Do you watch movies? And if so, what books or movies have most helped you pause, stop, reset, and how?
Well, I read voraciously. By my bed, there's probably, 10 or 12 books piled up at the moment. So, and yes, and films are useful as metaphors, aren't they? I think. So in terms of books, the ones I've read most recently that I think make me certainly pause, there's an interesting couple of books by a guy called Robert Lanza about a concept called biocentrism. And that is basically the theory that if you follow what happens at the quantum level now, where particles, it's proven, behave differently when they're observed by consciousness. Robert Lanza expands that into the possibility that the world is revolving around consciousness, and that matter appears when it's observed. So that sounds a bit highbrow, doesn't it? But if that's a reality, and I mean, you can look at all sorts of stuff on YouTube now, which is fascinating, that it shows that the scientific community realise that this is actually starting to be fact. We've all got to think, just the premise that we've worked on until now is just complete nonsense. So we should all be pausing, stopping, and resetting on that calibration. If you read some of Carlo Rovelli's books on time, basically now scientifically, it's kind of scientifically proven that the concept of time, as we understand it, doesn't really exist. So that's why I lie in bed at night thinking about.
Interesting. Yeah, some of these concepts, it's fascinating. These holographic universes, circular time conversations, and she said it gives you a moment to pause and reflect and question, which I think can be really helpful without getting too lost in it. Without going into the green fairy said, which is a bit of a dangerous place sometimes you'll end up in.
Yeah. Films. There was a great film called Cool Hand Luke. Do you remember that? From
with the eggs? Yes, Cool Hand Luke.
With the eggs. But the statement, sometimes nothing's a real cool hand, which is when he won a game of poker with absolutely nothing in his hand. As a young man, I definitely followed that, because I really started with nothing, and actually sometimes nothing is a really cool hand. So yeah.
Lovely, great reminder. I think we're to put it on the one to watch list. And we've been reflecting. My friends have got kids who are like sort of early teens. None of them have seen those old movies at all. They don't shop on Netflix or Amazon Prime. So there's a whole rack of those movies that I think some don't age that well, fascinatingly, but others really do. And they've got those moments. So I get that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Sometimes you get caught up. You're right, the reset. If you've actually got things that are kind of working, it's really hard to reset. The number of us in the UK that have gone, why don't we live where it's warmer and sunny on a beach? And it's like, well, because we've got the NHS and we've got this. But there's this sort of, if you really are at the nothing point, then you can just go, right, I'm off. Very fascinating space.
Yeah, absolutely.
So during your resets, John, during these moments, what helped you through it? When you look back on the biggest, moments you've been through, what helped you navigate those post-doc resets?
I think, my biggest, probably the biggest moment as a young person, I was about 16 or 17, and my mother was really badly paralyzed in an accident. That kind of sort of threw me into a world of disability, and I saw quite a dark side of life, which actually, as I've got older, I realised most people in their families, there's some sort of horrendous thing has happened to somebody. But I think that taught me that how lucky I was, really, and that life was worth living, and that actually no experience is a bad experience. So once you realise that you're going to learn whatever happens, and actually sometimes it's not going to be great, sometimes it will be fantastic. I think that sort of gives you an ability to sort of press on and learn from anything, good or bad. And that's always been my philosophy, really, that, you should live, if you're lucky enough, you should live life to the full.
And it sounds like I've had similar with my mother being disabled, but obviously different with the accident she faced and sorry went through that. You find that you mentioned your wife earlier. Was it sort of people and family that are most how you navigate the challenging times?
Yeah, I think I've always tried to impress on my children, just to get out there and live, an interesting and fascinating life. So yeah, I think I'm quite a self-resilient person. So I kind of think that it's up to me to get through whatever issues there are. What tends to happen there, if you're like that, is you tend to have people who rely on your strength in order to get them through situations. But I guess I'm kind of built for that, really. I'm very happy to help people through.
And were you that sort of resilient child as well? Like growing up, were you sort of a strong, not loner, but do you have that character in your youth as well, or was that forged as you became an adult?
I didn't. Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't realise it, but I was okay at school. I was a bit of a sort of bit of a naughty boy, I guess. But my parents were called in one night to a parents' evening, and most parents' evenings, they came back a bit disappointed. But then one night, my teacher said, "Well, look, we're really impressed with John. He's probably got the most leadership skills that we've ever met in a person." And they started sort of smiling, thinking, "Well, this is fantastic." And then she said, "But unfortunately, he's leading everyone in the wrong direction." So
that sounds like you, John. Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess even though I didn't realise it, somehow I had that kind of strength that people want to follow and lead in their lives, I guess. Yeah. I say that in all modesty.
Indeed. Well, you are sort of this sort of humble leadership type guy, and I think you sort of built that up, and it is that sort of that cycle pattern, right? Sometimes you have that natural aspect, and then because you have it, you do it, and it builds a sort of a muscle, a competence, which then out. Some people listening to the show may be looking, I think, to reset what's possible for them in their lives. whether things aren't working out at all or whether they're doing okay, want to make it even better. If somebody's listening in, John, what's your biggest suggestion for them and how they can make those shifts and resets?
I think probably the biggest suggestion is don't wait for somebody else to give you your opportunity. That you actually make your own life. You make your own existence. If your life's good, it's you that makes it good. If it's bad, it's you that actually are making it bad. You're responsible for your own life, so don't blame somebody else for your unhappiness. Just get on and sort it out. If you're not in a comfortable place, don't rely on somebody else to change that for you. And I think we're developing a culture and a society at the moment that really just looks to other people to provide happiness and sort of everything that people want out of life. The world's not like that. So.
And you're right. There is this thing. We go from, our great grandparents who were just happy to have water, food, and shelter to, if you haven't got a unicorn on your special lawn on your roof, then you're failing. Funny video.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not decrying what's happening at the moment, but you've got a government that are paying everyone's heating bills. I mean, that would have been completely unheard of in the past. And, I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's symptomatic of the way society's going, that, ultimately governments will be making everybody's decisions for them.
Yeah.
And, I'm really, I really strongly believe in entrepreneurialism. And I'm concerned that the sort of society we live in now is sort of stifling that.
So I'm sort of half on board and half not. I'm a bit of a social capitalist. I think there is an element of my Star Trek upbringing, everybody should be handled and then come from a good place of creativity, but that isn't always reality, as you and I know. If somebody is here sort of either needing, they've had a failure with the business stuff or looking to start out, where do they start, right? So they've taken on, I've got to drive my business forward. It's on me. Where's the best place, or how can they sort of move forward with growing a business or starting a new business?
The first thing that they have to think about is what is the business going to do, because they have to attract people to buy what they're effectively selling. So, the number of companies that just don't get anywhere because basically the product no one is interested in buying it. So you really have to come up with some kind of idea that solves a problem. And if you can solve a problem for somebody, then you've got the start of a business. My advice would be to go out and try and get interest and sales for that, and then build things up behind, because you always have to build revenue before cost. And so often I see the opposite. I see people that don't have a product, or they spend a lot of money on developing a product, which no one's really interested in buying, but they get sort of trapped in this cycle and they're building costs, possibly borrowing money for something that'll never get sold.
And do you think anybody can become a good salesperson, or is that one of those things you can hire it in? Because I think that's what I've looked at and been challenged by. There's definitely different schools of thought around sales, but the theory is, you want to go get a pint of milk, you go to shop pint of milk. If you want to go get a great sales guy, in theory, it's that easy to go hire a salesperson. It doesn't seem to be in reality here in the UK that easy to find good salespeople, good biz dev people. That may just be my limited experiences. I'm just curious your thoughts on
No, I mean, it's really, really difficult. And, I started selling, I became a sales manager, et cetera, and sort of moved up the career ladder. So you think I would be able to find good salespeople, but, probably the one thing that I found the most difficult was getting good salespeople. I mean, it's particularly in this country, it's very, very, very difficult. And I think selling is there's a certain je ne sais quoi in a good sales guy that is not is experiential. They've learnt it through experience rather than being taught it. So that most of the good sales guys I've ever met, they're really, they've got texture. They've had experiences in their life where they know the reality of what life's all about, and then they become better salespeople because of that. So if we're in a society where those sort of experiences are taken away from people because society is supporting people, you're going to get less of those kind of people around. Cool, that was a bit of a rant, wasn't it?
No, I like this. Is not ranty, John. This is good. This is the stuff I've been trying to draw out of you for a year. It's like, no, it's good. And just, being rigorous. When we say sales guys, I mean women, men, robots.
Yeah, guys means everybody now, doesn't it? So,
yeah. No, it's. I love how you said it. It's like people they have that reality to it, of life. They are miles ahead in terms of that. I've experienced amazing sales, amazing entrepreneurs, and ones that you just pull your teeth out going, how are they in business? And I'm sure we've all had those moments where we messed up ourselves, but the difference between the amazing people that get it and build relationships and do it well and those that don't, it's been what's probably most fascinating for me 20 years in. It's like you and I know incredible people, not all of which are the ones you necessarily want to have on your team building out a business with you, which is the nature of it, I guess.
Well, I guess, but somebody, people have said to me, well, look, I've got this great salesperson, but I really don't like them. Well, do you actually, if you need sales, do you actually have to like everyone that works for you? At the end of the day, it's a business, isn't it? And
it's also fascinating. We live in a world of you must know, like, and trust before a sales happen. And it's true. And also, if you want to buy a newspaper or a pint of milk or a can of Coke, it tends to be fish and chips. It's less of that dynamic, right? Different worlds, different businesses.
But selling it's a people skill, isn't it? So a good salesperson, 90% of their time is in building relationships, and people buy from people. Particularly in the sort of B2B high capital value world, which is kind of like where I come from. So it's all about people and trust, and people buy from people, and those sorts of skills are few and far between, really. Yeah. I could go on for hours about this.
Well, we will do some more calls about this in the future, hopefully. For our listeners listening in, this is my sort of water cooler moment. They're like, I heard this show with John, and he said, what's like the one takeaway you really want people to be left with from getting to know you a bit today, John?
So I think if you're alive and you're healthy and you're educated, even at a basic level, that's a total privilege. So don't waste it. You got one life. Don't waste it. Don't let somebody else or them, in inverted commas, because people always say, oh, they're digging up the road, or they've put up our taxes. They is this sort of an amorphous concept of people that don't really exist. Don't let them ruin your life.
I like that. That's really nice. And if you're not there, take a breath and work on it. But it's not always easy on those bad days. But no, I like that. Don't waste it. There's a whole question we get into another time about what wasting a life is and what actually matters. And maybe you could touch on that just for a second. Out of everything you've seen, you've been around people that have made a fortune, others that have done really ethical works and not got paid so much, some with families, some not. What do you think matters in a life these days? Out of all the exciting opportunities we have in the world.
Well, that's up to you, isn't it? If you believe a life well lived is watching Netflix every night and becoming a TV critic, then do it. I tend to sort of be around business people. So you get this view that success is building a big business, but we're very judgmental about the groups that we're with. But if success is helping the homeless, just having a wife and kids and looking after your family, if it's gardening, whatever you want to do, as long as you're comfortable with it and you feel fulfilled, don't let anyone stop you doing that. There's plenty of people that they've got a really comfortable life and they go out and everyone's going, "Oh, you're not a success, are you? You're not driving for this, you're not driving for that." Well, quite frankly, they're probably happier than a lot of the people that are driving for things. So
I'm present to this sort of as one get older, the game changes. What seemed great when you were 20 isn't necessarily the same when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, if you get that far.
I think, for me, it's always been experiences. I think life is about getting as much experience as possible. So that's why I've kind of lived the life I've lived. And I've been very privileged that I've been healthy through that. So when I go to meet my maker, if there is one, I can hopefully say I haven't wasted my life.
So one of the things, John, I love, and hopefully you've enjoyed the process, is maybe people that that I don't yet know. Is there anybody that you think could be an amazing guest and you'd love to listen to their answers to these questions?
Okay, so I have this real view that everyone has a fantastic story. So I think that you should. I've done a lot of work with homeless people, sort of homeless, but on the streets, not running sort of homeless charities or something. Sort of being out with homeless people. So I think that you should go and take somebody off the streets, who's homeless, or maybe somebody that's traveled from Syria over the Mediterranean and tries to get into the UK on a boat, and interview them and see what they think about the concept of resetting their lives. I think that would be absolutely fascinating.
No, it is. And again, what I love about doing it, I didn't know that about you. I spent 20 years, like you say, sometimes with our charities, just on the street and having those conversations, but back then wasn't recording. I've always been quite shy about getting it too much like, let's take a selfie. It's more about that human interaction. But that, as you say, that would be a really interesting and real reality check. Some of the people, actually, she's just left, one of the Ukrainians we got to know was very much impacted. And some of the conversations were really real. And both sides of those things. Same with Afghanistan, Syria. So yes, I'll take that on board, and I appreciate the reality of that suggestion, John. It's a good one.
Yeah, instead of sort of somebody that's got a name in business, or those people, they're not high profile, but they've probably had more interesting lives than any of us. Why did you pause, stop and reset? Well, somebody bombed my house in Aleppo. Sort of slightly different challenges than the ones we have.
Very much so. And it's part of what gives that reality check sometimes when you've got people having a hissy fit because the train's 5 minutes late or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know there are people listening in, John, who want to learn more about you and what you do. What's the best way for them to learn more about you and connect? Is that at johnburness.com?
So I've got a personal website, johnburness.com. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Just key my name in. Luckily, there aren't that many John Burnesses in the world. Then also, I published a book 2 or 3 years ago, which is called Against the Odds, and that is available on Amazon. So, if you're interested to find out more about me and some of my sort of business involvements, then buy the book.
Good plug. So, John, thank you for being with us today on the show, Pause, Stop, Reset. I really appreciate your time and being as open as you are. Personally, what I found most valuable was this reminder about how business is about getting over and around obstacles and being with that and taking time to reflect, having got past one of those. And this thing about not worrying about what others are thinking about you, remembering that, you're not that important to them, even if you are, only maybe 10 seconds, and when people do care about you, really cherish them. And that takeaway that if you are alive, healthy, and have some education, don't waste it and don't let them bog you down, get you down. Nor just random, as my mum and grandmother used to tell me. With that said, John, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up the show?
No, only to thank you. Thank you for listening. I did rant a little bit, but hopefully you got the gist.
This wasn't a rant. Ready to get you ranting more. I like you when you rant. It's the fun stuff.
Thank you.
So with that said, John, it's an absolute pleasure. It's nearly time for us to once again pause, stop, reset. And so before we do, so you get maximum value, please head to Apple Podcasts, make sure you're subscribed, give us 5 stars, make a comment on what you heard and take some action on. Remember, you can find more resources and information at pause.reset.com in the portal. We'll see you next time. Until then, pause.reset. Bye for now.
Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pause.reset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.